So the first trip was back in 1985, and the wall was still standing. And I broke off from the group of other high school students, and I just wandered off on my own. And pretty soon I was face to face with a German soldier who was not much older than I was. And he leveled a machine gun at me and told me that I had no business wandering in that area. This last time, or the time I'm discussing, the wall was down and the city was once again bustling. And it had been over 20 years since I had last walked down the streets of Berlin, and I was really, really enjoying myself. And as the week of walking around the city wound down, I realized that Shabbat was fast approaching. And I decided that I didn't want to spend Shabbat alone in my hotel room. So I headed towards the Oranienburger Straße and its beautiful synagogue. I got there and went through the checkpoint and the metal detector and was frisked and was asked what I was doing there. And I was told that the minyan was about ready to end. Surprise, but I didn't want to walk away. I went in and like a good Ashkenaz Jew, and not a Yeki, but an Ashkenaz Jew, I arrived just in time for Aleinu. There's an old tradition that the Ashkenaz Jews show up on Shabbat morning services for Aleinu because shortly after that, there will be a Kiddush luncheon. So not to be bothered with the rest of the prayers, they just want to eat. But the Yekis, the German Jews, we start on time. So I arrived for Aleinu and services ended and I started to walk out. And as I headed toward the exit, I noticed another group heading back into the sanctuary. And I asked if there was another minyan, and I was told yes. So I joined this one, enjoying myself from Yedid Nefesh all the way through Aleinu again. Announcements were made. A special Friday night potluck chavurah dinner was announced. Since I wasn't part of the congregation, I decided to sneak out and not interrupt their dinner. As I headed toward the exit, I didn't quite make it. Out of the blue, someone called, Entschuldigung, mein Herr, kommen Sie mit? Excuse me, sir, aren't you coming with us? Turns out I was being invited to the dinner. I told this kind person that I was just a visitor and that I didn't want to intrude. Now here is what, to this day, still gives me goose flesh. The Torah is actually read by other people and understood by Jews throughout the world. This person looked at me, smiled, and said, V'zacharta ki eved hayita be'eretz Mitzrayim al kein anochi mitzavcha la'asot et hadavar hazeh. Always remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I enjoin you to observe this commandment. These words are part of this morning's parashah. They close out the section dealing with, you guessed it, how we are to treat the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. I absolutely love it when something from the Torah speaks directly to my own experience. I never expected to hear this pasuk from the Torah quoted to me in the hallways of a German shul, especially since it was, he'd say, was not the parashah for that week. And I know that they didn't ask me because I was a rabbi. That, in fact, I tried to keep quiet. They found out during dessert, however, when they asked a question and I was the only one who could answer it. And it wasn't as if they had planned to have an extra guest. These German Jews took seriously the command to welcome strangers. I sat with them over Shabbat, and the next 2 days, I found out that many of them were from the former Soviet Union and knew firsthand what it was like to be treated like a stranger. They promised themselves that they would always be welcoming and would open their door to whomever showed up for services, for Kiddush, or a potluck dinner. Since then, I've often thought about this trip to Berlin. The Oranienburger Strasse Synagogue isn't the wealthiest or the largest shul I've ever visited. Yet that potluck dinner, with its large offering of vegan and vegetarian dishes, was one of the best meals I have ever had because it was offered from the heart. I was a stranger who just showed up and was welcomed as if they had been expecting me. Throughout these last parts of the Torah, we are once again reminded to treat strangers, widows, and orphans with compassion. The reason we do this, the Torah explains, is that we were strangers and slaves in the land of Egypt. Because we know from personal experience how badly slaves and strangers can be treated, we are commanded never to treat people who are less fortunate badly. And I never understood that verse, or any of those verses, until I was literally a stranger. The Torah isn't telling us to be polite to the stranger and then move on. Rather, it is telling us to welcome those who find themselves in our midst, to make them feel like they belong, that they are part of our community. And sometimes it's easy to pass by commandments like, remember that you were slaves, remember that you were strangers in the land, and not give them much attention. After all, none of us were ever literally slaves. However, we have all been strangers at one time or another. Think back on those times. Were you welcomed or ignored? Did you feel like they wanted you there? Or did you feel like you were bothering them? Like they wanted you to leave? The Torah wants us to recall those moments, especially the moments when we didn't feel so welcomed. Why? So we don't act in the same way. The days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are drawing closer, and we want God to welcome us, to make us feel at home. The Hasidic Rebbe's teach us that what happens on earth is often mirrored in heaven. If we want to be welcomed by God, the best way to ensure that is to welcome others who find themselves in our community. As we move through Elul to Tishrei, may we welcome all who come to be with us with outstretched hands and open hearts, welcoming them in the same ways we ourselves would like to be welcomed. Shabbat Shalom and Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Maxine, any questions?
No, I just want to say that it is, I love that portion because I really believe in it. In not just the stranger, but the homeless, the weak, to reach out. I think it's a commandment of us. It is a commandment.
Most assuredly.
So, even though it's Germany, it's wonderful that you had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've had similar experiences in Hasidic shtibels in Jerusalem, but they're on autopilot when it comes to welcoming the stranger. I mean, they do it, and they welcome you, they'll feed you, but they won't sit down with you and get to know you. And that's just their way, right? But in Germany, I never expected it, and it's wonderful. The Torah teaches us that there will always be poor. There will always be people who don't have a lot, and there's no shame in that, right? The reason people feel shame is because the haves make them feel the shame, right? With comments like, well, why don't you just get a better job? Or why don't you just, that's not what the Torah teaches, right? But the Torah says that because there will always be poor with you, you have to take care of them. You have to treat them with dignity and with respect. And so in this week's portion, it says when you're out cutting down your wheat harvest, whatever falls to the ground after you pass over the first time, you can't go back and pick it up for yourself. You leave it there for the poor. Now you'll say, well, that's charity. Well, yes, it is. But in the mind of the Torah, the poor have to actually go and collect it, and they have to get it for themselves. So they're actually doing something to feed themselves. It's not like you're walking up and say, oh, here, have this. I know you're poor. I'm not. Here, have this. And that's why Maimonides, in his 8 levels of tzedakah, praises the people who give tzedakah and they don't know who it's going to. And the person who gets it doesn't know where it's coming from. Because if you might have the biggest heart, and if you know who you're giving the money to, you might treat them differently. You might look down on them a little bit. And if they know where it's coming from, they might feel that they have to treat you much better because maybe that tzedakah will dry up. So if nobody knows where it's going or who it's coming from, that's great. But of course, the highest level is where you take the person who needs the help and teach them how to do it and get it for themselves. Teach them a trade, get them education, get them what they need so that they can take care of themselves, right? Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, now you fed him for a lifetime.
In the Torah, the Jews are told to leave portions for
the corners, the payot.
Poor, so that the poor have an opportunity.
Yes.
We don't do that.
No, we don't, because we live in a world of unrestrained capitalism, right? The Torah, people clutch their pearls when I say this, but the Torah is highly socialist in a lot of its thinking. Not to the point where it will lead to communism, but the idea is that you have people who have, and they need to share. Because, in the mind of the Torah, the human being didn't say, look at me, I am so amazing, I did this all on my own. The Torah warns us against that because everything comes from God. And it's not saying that God made Bill Gates successful. I don't think God works that way, right? Why Bill Gates and not, somebody else? But it's the idea that we have opportunities that are created because of the world we live in. And if we take notice of those opportunities or take advantage of those opportunities weren't created just for us, for me, or I'm the only one that could have that opportunity. And so the Torah says, when you go into the land and you're successful, don't think it's because you're so wonderful. Everybody else is worse than you in that land. And so you're the best out of the worst. And if you pat yourself on the back and you forget that God is doing this for you, that's where we run into trouble. And that's where we're into trouble right now, right? We have unrestrained capitalism. I know we have some regulation, but the idea is the more you make, the better. And you keep it for yourself, because God knows if you're a billionaire, tomorrow you might wake up and all that money will be gone and you won't have it. That's not going to happen, right? But then we look down our noses at people who don't have, or who didn't have the same opportunities, or couldn't get the same opportunities. And we say, well, why don't you just get a better job? Or why didn't you go to school?
The old bootlaces.
Huh?
The old bootlaces.
Yeah. And lots of people like that. And that works, but it doesn't work in a country like ours right now.
I don't look at the Torah as, when you say socialist, I look at those things as ethics, being ethical, which is a commandment to us,
right,
to be that,
yeah,
and to be loving and kind people. To me, that is what we should be. No argument about that. We have the responsibility to be this kind of person. That is, I think, the basis of who we are.
Well, that is. It's, Isaiah says we're to be or legoyim, a light to the nations. What does that mean? It means that our behavior will be recognized by other people, and then they will want to be like us.
No, they'll want to kill us.
A different definition of successful.
Yeah.
Yes. You don't have to be rich to be like that.
No.
I don't necessarily think of the Torah as socialist either. I think of it as, it was written in a very analog time. Everything was done by hand. Everything was created by hand. Everything had to be, meticulously completed with, by human detail, right? So now in a world where everything is digital and computer and, automated, we have to find ways to incorporate the same ideas. But the problem is that we haven't, our charity, so to speak, right? Our kindness has not caught up with our technology. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have.
100%. Now, when I use socialist to describe the Torah,
I know what you're saying.
I'm committing the genetic fallacy, right? That there was no socialism in the time of the Torah, but we have a word that suggests that we understand of what reflects what the Torah might be teaching, right? If you go, the kibbutzim in Israel were socialist communities. Everybody pulled their own weight. If you didn't have money, you did something else. If you had money, you helped to support the kibbutz, right? So that's socialism. Right, but the point is that idea comes out of the Torah. They didn't know socialism. They didn't know communism. They didn't know capitalism, right? But now that we're in a world where capitalism is the dominant force, at least in the Western world, and it's, how much you can make, right? He who has the most stuff before when he dies wins. But the flip side of that is he's still dead and he can't take it with him, right? So
I kind of agree with we need to catch up with technology. Our grandparents, or back then sometime, was more agrarian, and even people that are more agrarian now, when they plant more than they can use, they always say, hey, my corn crop turned out a whole lot better than I thought. Come get what you need.
unless you're a factory farm.
Yeah, if you're a factory worker,
No, factory farm. Then if we have more than we need, we just destroy it.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm not. But what you're talking about are people who have their own small farms and things like that, and that's great. But we don't have many of those anymore.
I'm saying it's a different time.
Yeah, well,
I think even though there's technology, there's always the opportunity, and always has been, to do things for the people on more of a local level. Those things have not changed. The technology, we are able to give just money, to whoever we want, which is really easy. Well, if you have the money. That's really easy to do, although, but you can still work on all kinds of levels, which people have always done, to help or create change or whatever. It's just,
yeah, and
many people think it's pointless, but
one of the things that is so, one of the negatives of technology is that we are aware of everything instantaneously.
whether they're true or not.
Well, whether they're true or not, but the idea is that what used to take days, if not weeks, to reach us, now reaches us in real time. So if there's an earthquake in Venezuela, we know about it while it's happening, and then people say, "Oh my God, we have to do something." Before, people would find out and say, "Yes, we have to do something,"
But it's been done.
but it's being done already, and we are taking care of people in our community. Right now, a lot of people are worried about the big ticket kind of things, like the big earthquakes, which are important. But then the people living on the streets in their own communities say, well, they brought it on themselves, or, So yeah, our values are twisted in a way, and I don't know how to get it back.
This morning coming here, I saw it was either 3 or 4 homeless people on the way here.
And you stopped and helped out.
I was already late for temple, so I didn't stop.
No,
But there's plenty of times when I do.
I had slipped a $10 bill into a card of personal.
I don't give money because
I don't,
I buy them
I don't
food.
care what they do with it. I just figured that, and particularly when the weather's bad, yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully they do something to keep warm.
100%.
That, you know what is a good thing?
Yeah.
You go to something like whatever, buy them blankets and gloves and, oh my God, I had a couple guys who were so happy that I brought razors for them and just give it to them.
Yes.
Because those are the things they need, or I buy them food.
Yeah.
Not because money is tricky.
Yeah, when I was in Brooklyn, I would travel to Manhattan and work on magic with a young man. A phenomenal magician, taught me a ton. But I noticed that he always had a backpack, and he always had a lot of Ziploc bags in there. And I asked him one day, he pulled one out, and in it he had a couple of pairs of socks, some underwear, and then he said, "This is men's underwear, and I have some women's underwear in other bags. Hand sanitizer. This is pre-COVID, but just some crackers and a bottle of water." And he says when the weather would change, he would start putting some gloves in and things. And I said, "Why are you doing that?" He said, he wasn't a Jewish kid. He said, "I just felt I needed to do something." And giving $5 to a person and then another $5, that's $10, and you don't know where that money, how it's being used. He says, but for $10 on Amazon, I can get 10 pair of cheap underwear. And by cheap meaning, not inexpensive. I can buy a case of water for a couple of bucks at Costco, and all of that. He says for $50, when I make the bags, I can help 10, 20 people. Says it stretches my dollar because he didn't have a lot of money. But the point is that he wanted to do something. And he said he felt that he was doing, he was helping people.
I used to collect things, and there's a lot of homeless in the woods by Paris Riverfront Park. And I would go walk the path and leave it, and then in the summer I went and there was a ton. And there's a lot of people with mentally ill, and then I didn't feel safe doing that anymore.
Well, the Torah never tells us to do anything stupid. Meaning, no, you don't have to.
It follows the caregiving laws too. You have to take care of yourself, or you can't take
Right.
care of anyone.
You don't.
You're not gonna be able to give if nobody is.
You don't have to put yourself in danger to fulfill a mitzvah.
Yeah.
Right. If you're walking down by the river and somebody's in the river drowning and you can't swim, you don't jump in and try to, but the Torah says life. Like, yes, the Torah says that's important. So pick up your cell phone and call 911. Throw something that would float to them. Throw them a stick that they can hang on to or something. I mean, not a little stick, but you can do something, but you don't have to put yourself in danger. And so that's one of my, Eliezer Slomovic, a blessed memory, taught me that a long time ago. The Torah never told us to do anything stupid, which is like, oh, wow.
See, now you asked me and I didn't have a question, but we had a whole conversation.
Yeah, so I have learned my lesson.
I think it's interesting though, because the idea of our kindness and our care hasn't kept up with the technology. I don't just mean in terms of its sophistication. I just mean in terms of with being able to know everything and see everything almost instantaneously across the world. The messages have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. You need to do more. You need to change the world. Well, you tell a 5-year-old they need to change the world, it means nothing to them. But you tell a 5-year-old to do something kind for their friend, and now you've changed that friend's world, right? So we forget to adjust our messaging to incorporate the smaller world, or keep the smaller world in the messaging, as opposed to just, shout about the global messages. We, with that technology has come obviously a global awareness, but at the cost of our local awareness.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I mean by our care and our kindness has not kept up with the technology.
I didn't mean to just what you were saying, but
No, yeah.
I look at the technology now, not the technology itself, but what people have done with it as an extremely dangerous place. And so social, whatever it's called, you don't know, and it's extremely dangerous in many, many ways, and not to be trusted.
Yeah. We Generation X and earlier, we are the dinosaurs in the age of the mammals, right? And what I mean by that is the technology picked up during our lifetimes and got way out of hand.
Yeah.
A couple of generations later, they'll be able to handle the technology because they've grown up with it, and they will learn their brains will have adapted, or they'll learn what to do. But right now, it's the same thing. Anytime that, like, I see, Nick, the Industrial Revolution, right? When you had machines doing what people had done by hand, the people who had done it by hand clutched their pearls and said, "Oh my God, what about?" And then the people who adapted the technology, like, "Well, no, this is much better." And then, we who have grown up with automation, we don't think anything of it, right? This is, my grandmothers, God bless them, microwave ovens were, beyond the pale. I mean, you just put it in there and you press a button, and is it safe? Is it, how many of us worry about microwaves? Nobody, because microwaves in general could be problematic, but a microwave oven, right? We don't glow, right? Open heart surgery. Open heart surgery. My father in 1982 had open heart surgery. If they did to him today what they did to him back then, we would sue them for malpractice. It's the technology adapts, and now we don't even think about it.
I had to say something about my mom. The chickpeas now come in a can, where my mom used to do the ones that were in the bag,
Right.
and they were
Soak
raw.
them, and
They were raw, and you literally had to cook them all day.
Yep.
And now they come in a can.
Right.
They're kind of al dente. If you want to make them a little more tender, you cook them,
Right.
Either on
Right.
a stove or in a microwave.
Because people want hummus when they want hummus
Yes.
from the chickpeas, or just go buy the hummus now.
You don't have to,
right? But the point is that, if we open our hearts and our minds to the Torah, we can learn lots of lessons that will benefit not only ourselves, but the world. And we could start small, and then that's like Rashi says on the verse in the Torah that says, "There will be poor with you always," and you got to take care of the poor. He says, you take care of the poor first in your immediate community. And then if you get all those poor taken care of, you branch out and go a little bit further. And then the question then comes, well, what about the non-Jews? He says, if all of your Jews are taken care of, you have to go out and help the non-Jews, because it's not fair. It's not, the Torah doesn't say there will be poor, there will be Jewish poor with you always. There will be poor with you. And once you expand, but Rashi says, you don't start out here sending money to wherever. You start in your neighborhood and take care of those people.
Yeah. But it's really hard, especially nowadays, because of drugs. I was, this Women's Caucus Street people come and speak about what's going on in the community. And we were talking about homeless, and I said, there's not enough places for homeless to live. And this woman said, oh yeah, there are places. And then 5 minutes later, she's saying, because of drugs or whatever, people who own properties that are, they're supposed to be renting
Yeah.
to people won't do it because it's damaged or this or that. So you can't have both. But they didn't have fentanyl that was laced with something so people get psychotic and punch holes in the walls in those days.
But also the other point is that putting homeless people in houses, that's nice, but that doesn't solve the
Right.
bigger problem, right? And this is something that I have to deal with, and I had to learn because I'm big on education. And I want people to get educated, and so get the schools in line, not necessarily doctrinally, but hire good teachers, pay them well, all of that. Well, but that's a piece of a much larger puzzle, because you could have the best teachers, you could have the best curriculum, you could have the best everything. And when half of your students don't get to eat breakfast every day,
Right.
that affects how they're going to behave and how they're going to function, right? So, or if a kid's getting the daylights kicked out of them at home by either a mother, a father, a sibling, and then they come to school and then they're bullied, and that's going to affect. We could have the best teachers, but when the kid comes to school and says, I have 6 siblings, dad is out of work or absent, and mom is working 3 jobs, it was not my day for breakfast. I mean, that is heartbreaking, right? Because how many of us worry where our next meal is coming from, but we have people in our community who worry about that. Nick, you had something.
Well, it was just a follow-up to what you were saying long before about real-time knowledge. And I thought that one of the problems is real-time knowledge doesn't allow for reflection.
No, because you feel you have to move right now, right? In Pirkei Avot, the book of rabbinic aphorisms that's in the Mishnah, I think it's Rabbi Tarfon, some rabbi says, it's not incumbent upon you to finish the work, but neither are you free to ignore it, right? So the idea is we don't have to solve all the world's problems. We don't have to, today, this group, we don't have to solve all of Huntington's problems, but we can't ignore it. Pardon?
Let's start with one.
To start with, but we can't ignore it. We have to do something.
I also see that it's not just doing something, because I read studies about programs, small programs, to help poor people without education, how to manage day-to-day tasks, which they often don't,
Yep.
or things in prison that have been successful. And even though these things are very successful, they are not implemented. I think I know why, but I think that the powers that be don't want this to happen.
Right. But if you look, I'm a big fan of Mayor Williams, because I've seen firsthand the stuff that he and the city council have done.
Yeah.
With the opioid epidemic and everything,
Too bad.
that now other larger cities are contacting him and the Huntington City Council for ideas of what they can do to try to deal with their drug problems, because Huntington, instead of pushing it off and ignoring it, had a mayor at the time who wanted to roll up his sleeves, a city council, and they handled it. Now, it's not, you say, but there's still homeless people. Yeah, but compared to what there was 10 years ago, apparently, it's a lot less, because programs have been implemented, ways of looking at the problems holistically, instead of just saying, well, it's drugs. Well, drugs is a piece of it, but if the person doesn't have a steady place to call home, that's going to push them to drugs. If they don't have work, if they don't have money, if they don't have any number of things, taking the drugs away, they're just going to go back.
Yeah.
Right? But it's
And no problem, problems didn't start, immediately. They didn't start overnight, so problems don't get fixed overnight.
My problem, if you started overnight, you were.
Well, I appeared.
You
so
weren't there, and then you were there.
I started singing.
And you started to sing,
That's
and
right.
God help
There was
us.
a documentary done.
About Canterbeth?
There should
Oh,
be
yeah,
one.
the one
There should be
it's
one. I'm
called
just saying.
The best cantor to come ever to Huntington, but now about Huntington
You go much?
and what we are doing. This was done some years ago, and it was up for an Academy Award. It didn't win, but
No, but it's out there, and it's,
it showed what we as a community, what our city had been doing to help. And it's wonderful.
I think too much, we look at the micro, and we started to look at the macro. We wanna revamp education, but there are many pieces that have to be addressed. And, so you can't today say, on Monday, we're gonna do this, and that's gonna change education. But what we also have to do is get our politicians and people who are in power to realize that cutting, say, school breakfasts and lunches, that's not a good idea. Well, there'll be people who take advantage of it. I would rather have people who have 2 parents, 4 grandparents who are multimillionaires eating a free breakfast at school or a free lunch than cutting the program because one person might take advantage of it, and then there are 25 kids who now have no food that day. I would rather err on the side of taking care of people.
That's a amen.
I like it. All right, we could do this all day, and it's Shabbos. There's nothing better to do on Shabbos, but I'll ask everybody, please rise, page 282 for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabech la'adon ha'kol, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כעם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו פורעים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתי זו בגובה מרומים הוא אלוהינו עליון אמת מלכנו אפס ולטוב ככתוב בתורתו ידעת היום והשבת אל לבביך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים השמיים ממעל והארץ מתחת עינו. כי המלכות שלך היא ולעולמי תמלוך בכבוד ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו echad.
You may be seated. We extend our condolences to David Johnson and his family on the recent passing of his beloved wife and their mother, Patricia. Funeral arrangements are not yet completed, so as soon as we know, have any more information, we'll get it out to you. But if you see David or talk to him, please extend your condolences. This week we observed the following yard sites: Patricia Hyman, Jack Hyman's wife, mother of Derek, Rebecca, Faith, Joshua, and David. Sam Ratowski, Harold Radow's father, Judy Woodruff's grandfather. Hyman Schenker, related to Ella. Joan Snyder, Stephen's cousin. Fred Island, related to Ed. Gladys Hamill, Dennis's mother. Frank Gableman, Steve Shaddle's maternal grandfather. Bess Levine, Marilyn Cohen's mother. Robert Pickles, Linda Klein's father. Helen Rose, Harold's mother. Dr. David Weinsweig, Tammy's husband, father of Zoe, Noah, and Annabella. Jane Jackson, Clarence's wife. Minnie Jacobs, Richard and Linda Kuntz's grandmother, Layla's mother. Rowena Pickholtz, Linda Klein's stepmother. Hal Schiff, Rena's uncle. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May their memories be a blessing to us all, and may they always rest in peace.
Amen.
Mourner's Kaddish is found on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ba'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlik malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala b'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach olam olamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shmei dekudasha b'richu. Le'elam yinkol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata. V'amiram ba'alma v'yimbru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimbru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimbru. Amen. All right, friends, Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos. Just a couple of quick announcements. Well, first of all, Yashar Kochek to Cantor Beth for leading the larger part of the service today. She's with us for the next 5 month. It'll only seem like a year, but it's really a month. But no, we are so grateful to have her here, and you'll be hearing more from her in general, but especially on high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Services tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Tomorrow afternoon, we have our classes at 1 o'clock, Hebrew 201, and then at 2 o'clock, our Let My People Know High Holiday Edition. And we're going to look at tshuva again, and then I'm going to give you some stuff to take and read and think about during the high holidays. The next Sunday we're off, but the following Sunday we have a special class, and details will be out on that in about a week. No meetings this week, so it's a quiet week. I know that we're going to be starting up the David Glick High Holiday Food Drive, and that will run through October, the end of October. So I'm sure you'll be getting an email so you can find out more about that. And I think that is it. We have our booklet from Hadar. Every holiday, the group Hadar Institute in Manhattan, which is a non-denominational Beit Midrash, non-denominational study house, puts out a booklet filled with inspirational teachings, readings, ideas. If you've never picked one up, they're free. They'll be at the back of the back of the chapel. They'll be throughout the building. So take it. If you know somebody who would like one, give them. This one is particularly good. They're all good, but this one in particular spoke to me.
When are they going to be there?
They're there now.
Oh, yep. Where are they?
In the back of the chapel.
Okay.
You just walk past.
They're very unobtrusive, but they're there.
They're there, and I'll be announcing them, and they'll be all over the place. You'll see them. And I think that's it. So we'll start closing out on page 322 with Ein Kelohenu. And yeah, and then
Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Eloheinu, Michad Adonenu, Michem Malkeinu, Michem Moshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shitinu, Avoteinu, Lefanecha et Ketoret Hasamim.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורות הבאים עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הבאים עולם. ויהיו בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הבאים עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הבאים עולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הבאים עולם. על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו סברים ארנן. לחיים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen.
Shabbat.
Cantor Beth germs. All right. For those of you who tuned in late, it was my fault. Cantor Beth had me so farmished, farblungent, whatever,
All tangled up.
all tangled up, and I forgot to hit the play. But let's see. There's Mom. Shabbat Shalom to all from Rabbi's mom and Cliff from a beautiful sunny day in PA. Wishing all a peaceful weekend and a good week ahead. Hi, Maxine and Miranda. See, nothing about you. See? See? See?
How are you?
And Judy Lundy, Shabbat Shalom all. Thank you. Same to you, Judy. All right, friends. Not a lot going on, but there's enough. So please come and be with us. I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, a good Shabbos. Please enjoy that beautiful day, and please be careful out there.